A neighbor sued me for non-existent noise, and her obsession revealed a dark secret. Hidden cameras captured 37 invasions of my home, exposing a web of manipulation that shook the entire condominium. Between blackmail and threats, a retired lady faced off against the building's tyrant. Prepare for a story of courage that will leave you in shock. Leave a like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. 3 in the morning. A violent knock on the door. You know that moment when you're in a deep sleep and are ripped awake like you've been jolted by electricity. Yeah, that's exactly how my nightmare with the neighbor from 302 began. Me? A 68-year-old retired teacher who just wanted peace after 4 decades putting up with teenagers. Her? The devil herself in a tweed suit and a fake smile. Seriously, when I moved into the Fairview condominiums, the realtor told me I was buying peace and quiet for the best years of my life. Ah, what a joke. What I bought was a front-row ticket to the circus of horrors run by the HOA president. 15 years in power. Even dictators don't last that long. It all started with an aquarium. Yes, you heard right, an aquarium. It wasn't a drum set. It wasn't a powerful home theater system or some kind of hyena breeding operation. It was a 10-gallon aquarium with 5 goldfish peacefully swimming while a small pump made a hum so light you'd need a bionic ear to hear it from the next apartment. But for Martha from 302, that hum was apparently the sound of the apocalypse. First came the polite knocks on the door. "Mrs. Helen, could you please do something about the noise? I'm having trouble sleeping." I, naive as a child on the first day of school, apologized profusely and promised to check the equipment. I even called a technician. He said everything was normal, that the noise was minimal, practically imperceptible. A week later, the knocks on the door weren't polite anymore. "Are you doing this on purpose? I've already warned you about this infernal noise." I tried to reason, to show that the sound could barely be detected. She scoffed, turned her back, and stomped away. In that moment, I should have realized I wasn't dealing with a rational person. But 40 years of teaching literature made me believe that dialogue always solves everything. My God, how naive I was. The next month, I received an official notification from the HOA. I was disturbing the peace with persistent nighttime noise. My jaw dropped. It was like being accused of theft when you can't even open your own pill bottle without help. At the next HOA meeting, I raised my hand to defend myself. 27. Pairs of eyes stared at me, as if I had announced I was going to open a nightclub in my apartment. "Folks, it's just an aquarium," I said, feeling the words catch in my dry throat. The technician confirmed the noise is minimal. "Mrs. Helen," interrupted the condo manager, a bald, hesitant man who always seemed on the verge of apologizing for existing. "We've had several complaints. Mrs. Martha hasn't been able to sleep for weeks." The said Mrs. Martha, sitting in the front row like the model student I never was, shook her head with an expression of suffering worthy of a soap opera. I looked around for support, but only found averted gazes or looks of disapproval. In that moment, I felt like I did on my first days at the school where I taught, isolated, invalidated, and completely without allies. I went home devastated. I, who had spent my entire life shaping minds, was being reduced to a troublesome old lady who didn't know how to live in a community. I looked at my aquarium, at the goldfish swimming oblivious to the human drama, and decided I wouldn't turn off the pump. They were living beings, for goodness sake. They needed oxygen. It was on a rainy Tuesday that everything changed. I had gone to the grocery store to buy a few things for dinner. When I came back, something felt different in the apartment. That strange feeling that someone's been in your stuff, I went straight to the living room and there it was. My aquarium turned off, the 5 goldfish floating inert on the surface. Dead. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was out of place except for the aquarium pump unplugged from the wall. The super swore nobody had requested access to my apartment. How could someone have gotten in? I cried all afternoon, not just for the fish, though I felt terrible for them, but for the violation. Someone had invaded my space, my sanctuary. I called my niece, Julia. She's a lawyer, the kind who wears sharp suits and heels and makes lawyers sweat in court. "Aunt Helen, this isn't right. Something is very wrong here. We need proof." The next day, a technician, a friend of Julia's, installed 3 discrete cameras in my apartment. One in the living room, another in the hallway, and the third in my bedroom. I didn't feel comfortable being filmed in my own home, but Julia insisted, "It's temporary, Aunt Helen, just until we figure out what's happening." 3 days later, I was at my friend Connie's house playing cards when I got a call from Julia. Her voice was trembling with rage. "Aunt Helen, you need to see this now." When I got home, Julia was already waiting for me in the building lobby, laptop under her arm, and an expression I'd only seen when she caught her ex-boyfriend cheating. "Look at this," she said. As soon as we got into the apartment, opening the computer on the kitchen table, the video started playing. Chad showed my living room empty. Suddenly the door slowly opened, and there she was, Martha from 302, walking into my apartment like she owned the place. She had a key to my apartment. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The woman walked around my living room, touched my things, examined the photo frames, ran her fingers over surfaces as if checking for dust. Then she went to the aquarium, which I had restocked with new fish, and looked at it with disdain. She pulled the plug from the outlet, waited a few minutes, watching the fish start to float, and then reconnected everything before leaving. My whole body trembled. It wasn't anger. It was a mix of fear, indignation, and a feeling of vulnerability I had never experienced before. Not even when I was mugged walking home from school 10 years ago did I feel this profound violation. "This is just the tip of the iceberg," Julia said, scrolling to another video. "In this one, Martha was in my bedroom, going through my closet. She was trying on my expensive scarves, the ones I brought back from a trip to France years ago. In another video, she was in my kitchen, opening my fridge, tasting my sweets. Aunt Helen, there are over 10 videos in 3 days. She's been coming in here practically every day when you leave. I barely had time to process that when the doorbell rang. It was a process server. I was being sued. Martha was suing me for constant noise damaging her physical and mental health. She was asking for $50,000 in damages. $50,000 for an aquarium pump that barely made noise. It was like being fined for breathing too loudly. The absurdity of the situation was so great that I started to laugh. The process server looked embarrassed, probably thinking I was having a nervous breakdown. Maybe I was. "Aunt Helen, this is serious," Julia warned when he left. "But we have evidence now. Let's fight back." Fight back. That word had never been part of my vocabulary. My whole life, I had been the peacemaker, the one who avoided conflict, the one who believed in dialogue. Always be the bigger person, I used to tell my students when there were arguments. But now I wanted war. In the following days, the invasions continued. Julia documented everything meticulously. Meanwhile, the lawsuit moved forward. My niece did some research and discovered something shocking. This wasn't the first time Martha had sued neighbors. In the past 10 years, there had been at least 5 similar cases, all resolved with settlements because people preferred to pay up rather than confront her. "She's a predator," Julia said. "She picks people who seem vulnerable, the elderly, people living alone, newcomers to the condo, people she thinks won't fight back." Little did she know she had picked the wrong person this time. The Fairview condominiums had a peculiar tradition: afternoon tea every Wednesday in the community room. It was an informal gathering where residents made small talk while having tea and cookies. I had never attended. I'm more the type who prefers a good book to idle chatter. But that Wednesday, I decided to make an appearance. When I entered the room, the conversation stopped immediately. 20 impeccably dressed ladies stared at me as if I were an alien. Martha, who clearly presided over the meeting from her special chair, yes, she had a special chair, almost choked on her Earl Grey. "Good afternoon, ladies," I said with the sweetest smile I could muster. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." The silence continued for a few awkward seconds before the condo manager's wife, because of course they were a brown-nosing couple, stood up. "Mrs. Helen, what a pleasant surprise. Please join us." I took a cup of tea and sat strategically across from Martha, maintaining eye contact as I sipped the hot liquid. She looked away first. Small victories. The conversation slowly resumed, but there was a palpable tension in the air. I didn't say anything about the invasions or the lawsuit. It wasn't time yet. I just observed. And what I saw was fascinating. A clear hierarchy, with Martha at the top and the other women orbiting her like planets around the sun. Some seemed genuinely to admire her. Others clearly feared her. After tea, I was approached by a petite lady named Clara who sold flowers at the shop on the ground floor. "Mrs. Helen," she whispered, looking around to make sure no one was listening, "we need to talk, but not here. Come to my shop early tomorrow." The next morning, before I even had my coffee, I went to the flower shop. Clara was watering some begonias, but she dropped the watering can as soon as she saw me. "Close the door," she asked. I obeyed, intrigued. "I know what's happening with you. It's not the first time she's done this." "She who?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "Martha." Clara rolled her eyes. "She did the same thing to the old resident of your apartment. Noise complaints, then a lawsuit. The poor thing ended up selling for less than half its value just to get rid of the torment." My heart raced. "And why did nobody do anything?" Clara gave a bitter laugh. "My dear, Martha has practically run this building for 15 years. She has dirt on everyone. The manager, she knows about his affair with his secretary, Mrs. Eleanor from 501. Her teenage daughter who got pregnant and had an abortion. She collects secrets like she collects stamps." I left the flower shop with my mind racing. So it wasn't just my paranoia. The woman was truly a manipulative sociopath who terrorized the entire condo. In the following days, I formed strategic alliances. The night doorman, Joe, started noting every time he saw Martha leaving her apartment towards mine when I wasn't there. Clara discreetly spread the word among some trustworthy residents that I had proof against the president. Meanwhile, the invasions continued. We counted 37 unauthorized entries in 3 months, and worse, with each invasion, she got bolder. She started taking small items, an old photo of my parents, a souvenir from a trip to Greece, a pearl brooch my grandmother gave me. Things she probably thought I wouldn't miss, but I did, and I documented everything. In the 4th month of this nightmare, Martha made a crucial mistake. During one of her invasions, she accidentally knocked over a small shelf where I kept some books. The noise was loud enough to attract the neighbors' attention. 3 residents witnessed her hasty exit from my apartment. One of them even took a photo with their phone. That same week, during a routine check of the building's security cameras, which Julia requested as part of the lawsuit, we discovered that several recordings had been accidentally erased. Coincidentally, they were all from times when Martha had entered my apartment. Someone is helping her, Julia deduced. Someone with access to the security system. It didn't take long to find out who. The super Mike, a quiet and seemingly harmless man who had worked in the building longer than Martha herself. Why would he do it? The answer came in the most unexpected way. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was coming back from the grocery store when I saw Mike sitting alone on the garden bench, looking devastated. Normally I would have walked past. We were never close. But something made me stop. "Everything okay, Mike?" He looked up, surprised I was talking to him. "Oh, Mrs. Helen." His eyes were red. "My wife, she found out." "Found out what?" "About Mrs. Martha. About us." My jaw almost hit the floor. Him and Martha. It was like discovering your pet hamster was actually a Russian secret agent. "The super. And the president," I stammered. "It's not what you're thinking," he quickly explained. "It's not that, it's worse." He swallowed hard. "She's been blackmailing me for years. She knows about a mistake I made in the past. She uses it to make me do things like giving her copies of keys, turning off cameras." "You gave her a copy of my key?" I asked, trying to control my anger. He nodded, looking defeated. "Yours, and about 10 other apartments. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Helen, truly." I sat down next to him, my brain processing this new information. "Mike, do you keep any record of these requests from her?" His eyes met mine. "Yes, I do. A notebook with dates, times, everything. At first it was to protect myself in case she tried to throw me under the bus. Then it just became a habit." I lightly touched his arm. "That notebook, would you be willing to show it to me?" He seemed to consider for a moment, then nodded, slowly. "I'm tired of all this, Mrs. Helen. My wife threatened to leave me if I don't put an end to this. And she's all I have." That night, I received a copy of Mike's notebook. It was a goldmine. Years of detailed records of all of Martha's manipulations. Duplicate keys, cameras turned off, even small accidents orchestrated to harm residents she didn't like. It was grotesque and fascinating at the same time, like watching a car crash in slow motion. Julia almost had a fit when I showed her the material. "Aunt Helen, this is pure gold. With this, we can not only win the lawsuit, but turn the tables. She can be sued for trespassing, theft, emotional distress." The court hearing was scheduled for the following week. I was nervous, of course. Martha had resources, influence, and probably the immediate respect of the judge. After all, she dressed and carried herself like a respectable lady of society, while I, with my natural grey hair and comfortable clothes, looked exactly like what I was, a retired teacher with no grand pretensions. But I had something she didn't: documented truth. As the hearing date approached, something fascinating began to happen in the condo. Small gestures of solidarity. Clara left a pot of begonias by my door. Joe, the night doorman, always let me know when he saw Martha leaving her apartment at suspicious hours. Even some of the ladies from tea started greeting me in the elevator. The tide was turning. The annual building party fell 2 days before the hearing. I normally wouldn't go, crowds were never my thing, but Julia insisted. "It's the perfect opportunity to show that you're not the villain in this story," she argued. "Besides, I have a surprise planned." The surprise, I later discovered, was a slideshow during the party, projected onto the community room wall. Initially, it was just old photos of the condo, a trip down memory lane that made everyone smile nostalgically. Then, without warning, images of Martha entering my apartment when I wasn't there appeared. Photos of her trying on my clothes, a video of her unplugging my aquarium. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Martha, who was frozen in the middle of the room, a glass of red wine halfway to her mouth. "What does this mean?" she finally managed to say, her voice trembling with rage. Julia, who was controlling the presentation, smiled sweetly. "Just some interesting records my aunt wanted to share with the community. After all, transparency is important, isn't it, Mrs. Martha?" What followed was pure chaos. Martha tried to turn off the projector. When she couldn't, she threw her wine glass at the equipment, staining the white wall. She started screaming that I was manipulating images, that it was all lies, that I wanted to destroy her reputation. It was then that Mike stepped forward. "It's not a lie, Mrs. Martha," he said, his voice surprisingly firm. "You've been doing this for years, with Mrs. Helen, with the previous resident, with at least 10 other people in this building." Other voices started joining in. Clara mentioned how her plants had been accidentally damaged after she refused to vote in favor of one of Martha's proposals. A lady from the 5th floor reported losing jewelry after unexplained visits. The floodgates had opened. Years of fear and silence were giving way to a collective catharsis. Martha looked around, seeing herself for the first time without allies, her face twisted by a mix of rage and panic. Then she did what many bullies do when cornered. She attacked. "You're all ungrateful. I dedicated 15 years of my life to this condo. I maintained order, discipline. Without me, this place would be chaos. You'll regret this." She stormed out, pushing people out of her way. The silence that followed was quickly replaced by a murmur that grew in volume. People approached me to offer support, to share their own stories of intimidation, to express relief that someone had finally had the courage to stand up to the dragon. Fauve 302, as some ironically called her. The court hearing 2 days later was almost anticlimactic after the drama at the community party. Julia presented all the evidence: 37 recordings of invasions, Mike's notebook, resident testimonies. The judge, a middle-aged woman with perceptive eyes, observed everything with an impassive expression. Martha and her lawyer tried to discredit the evidence. They claimed the recordings had been manipulated, that Mike was a problem employee with a personal grudge, that I was a lonely elderly woman seeking attention. When it was my turn to speak, I felt a lump in my throat. For a moment, I was back, to being that shy teacher on the first day of school 40 years ago. Then I looked at Martha, sitting there in her perfect little suit, her pearl necklace, her calculated expression of an innocent victim, and anger gave me clarity. "Your Honor," I began, "I am a retired teacher. I spent 40 years of my life teaching young people to respect each other, to resolve conflicts with words, to use dialogue as the primary tool. I moved to Fairview condominiums seeking peace in my retirement. Instead, I found persecution, invasion of privacy, and a systematic campaign to defame and expel me from my own home. I spoke about the aquarium, about the dead fish, about waking up every morning wondering if someone had entered my home during the night, about the constant fear, the insecurity, the feeling like I was going crazy when things moved without explanation. I am not just here for myself, I concluded. I am here for all who were silenced by fear, for all who sold their apartments below market value to escape the harassment, for a community that deserves to live without fear of a tyrant hiding behind a smile and a tweed suit. The judge raised an eyebrow, the first sign of emotion she showed throughout the hearing. She immediately dismissed Martha's lawsuit against me and ordered the opening of a criminal investigation against her for trespassing, theft, and falsifying evidence. I left the courtroom feeling light for the first time in months. Julia hugged me tightly. "You were amazing, Aunt Helen." The consequences in the condo were immediate. A special meeting was called, and Martha was removed from the HOA presidency. The board, investigating the accounts, discovered misappropriation of funds from the reserve fund for improvements that only benefited her unit. The security system was completely revamped with strict key control and cameras in the hallways. Martha put her apartment up for sale 2 weeks later. No one showed up to say goodbye when the moving truck arrived. It was as if a spell had been broken, freeing everyone from an evil enchantment. As for me, I kept my aquarium, of course. I bought new fish. This time, I chose some more colorful and vibrant species. The soft hum of the pump, which was once the source of so much drama, now sounds like music to my ears. A reminder that even at 68, it's never too late to fight for what's yours. The Fairview condominiums went through a transformation. HOA meetings, once dominated by a single voice, are now spaces for genuine debate. Afternoon tea still happens, but now it includes people of all ages and lifestyles. I attend occasionally, more to maintain the new friendships than for the love of gossip. Several residents sought me out to thank me, to share their own stories of intimidation, to express relief at finally being able to live without fear. A lady from the 4th floor called me the condo hero. Exaggeration, of course, but I admit it made me smile. I know what you must be thinking. Happy ending, huh? Justice prevailed. Well, more or less. Reality is rarely as clear as we'd like. The 6 months of battle took their toll. Sleepless nights, health affected by constant anxiety, the loss of that innocence about living in community. I still catch myself double-checking that the doors are locked before bed. I still look out the window when I hear footsteps in the hallway. I still feel a tightness in my chest when I see someone who looks like Martha on the street. But I gain something I didn't expect, the certainty that, even at my age, even alone, I still have the strength to fight. The discovery that there are people who care, who risk themselves for others, who choose the right thing even when it's difficult. Yesterday I received a letter. It was from a young teacher who just moved into the apartment that used to be Martha's. She wrote to introduce herself and to invite me for coffee. She mentioned she heard my story and was inspired by my resilience and courage. Resilience and courage. 2 qualities I never imagined would be associated with me. The shy literature teacher who preferred the company of books to people. Maybe life really does begin at 60, as they say. Maybe only then have we lived long enough to know what's worth fighting for. If there's one lesson I learned from this whole story, it's that silence protects aggressors, never victims. That communities are reflections of what we allow to happen in them. And that we should never ever underestimate a grey-haired lady with an aquarium and a hidden camera. Oh, and if by chance you're watching this video and live at the Grand Oaks Residences, yes, that one. Talk to Clara at the flower shop. She'll tell you some interesting stories about the current condo manager. Some people never learn, but we did. We learned. If you liked this story, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to be notified when I post the continuation. How I sued my neighbor for emotional distress and won enough to travel to Europe. Believe me, the second part is even more satisfying than the first. And if you also have a neighbor from hell story, tell it in the comments. I love knowing I'm not the only one who's been through this. We're a community of toxic neighbor survivors, aren't we? Best regards, and remember, lock your doors, install cameras, and never ever trust a lady in a tweed suit who smiles too much. Oh, and don't forget to comment where you're watching from. I love knowing my story is reaching people from all corners of this wonderful country. Until the next video.